Is Minneapolis expensive? I don't know, but I will tell you is most videos try and answer that question by giving you a bunch of averages and rankings. Well, this is not that video. I am breaking that question down, is Minneapolis expensive, into 3 specific parts. Buying into Minneapolis, staying here month to month, and then living a normal everyday life. Then you can decide if Minneapolis is expensive. Well, before we get into this video, I'm going to be super clear about what this video is and what this video is not. What this video is not, this is not some rankings video. This is not a detailed spreadsheet budget analysis, line item by line item, what your monthly expenses are going to be. And this is not what you should think about Minneapolis. What I am doing is breaking down the 3 ways people usually answer the question, is Minneapolis expensive? We're looking at that by answering 3 things. What does it look like to buy into Minneapolis? What does it generally cost to remain here over time? And what everyday life tends to look like once things feel normal? And at the end of this video, I'm going to pull all these pieces together and I will show you why Minneapolis can look inexpensive on paper, feel expensive once you get here, but still make complete sense. Clear enough? Let's get into it. When people ask if Minneapolis is expensive, the first place that question usually starts to get answered is when they try and buy into it. Not in theory, not with comparison charts, but when somebody actually goes out and buys a home. And a very common starting point, of course, is going to be the median home value. What you will find for the year that just ended 2025, or in January of 2026 as I make this video, median single family home value for the Minneapolis metro, and I'm not talking about Minneapolis, we're talking about the greater metro, my friends. Median single family home value was about $390K. And if you take that and we're talking about a single family detached home, the American dream, if you will, that value hops up even a bit higher to about, we're going to call it $425,000. So now you've got that $390,000 to $425,000. That's the number people start anchoring themselves to, deciding on whether or not Minneapolis feels expensive. And I think the thing to understand is what those numbers represent once you actually get inside of Minneapolis. So, you know, the $390,000 to $425,000 price range, buyers, you are typically going to be looking at older housing stuff from the earlier 1900s to mid-century things. Square footage is more modest. We're probably talking about 2, 3, 4 bedroom homes, 2, 3 baths, somewhere around 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. Turnkey, fully updated options at that $425,000 number exist, but they are few and far between, and they are gone like that when they hit the market, which I think adds to the perception that certain price ranges move really quickly. So what you have to understand, depending on where you are coming from, for many, I would say the vast majority of most neighborhoods in the Twin Cities metro, that median price point is not buying new construction. It's probably not buying super updated. What you are mainly going to be getting is location, proximity to downtown, walkability, access to parks, trails, established blocks in the neighborhood, things that haven't changed dramatically in decades. That is where a lot of that value is going to be concentrated. And this is where people start to answer the question differently, right? Some look at that and say, hey, this location, this stability, that school district, this makes sense and they're comfortable paying for it. Others look at this 75-year-old, 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom home and say $425,000 feels like a lot. And is it expensive? That really depends on you. And now you've got some numbers to start comparing this to. The other thing that's really worth making the point here is Minneapolis versus the suburbs. My channel, if you watch any of our videos, and check us out, we've got some really good ones. I shoot mostly in the West Metro. And I will tell you right now that $390,000 to $425,000 access median family home value in Minneapolis, that entry point is going to be below what it will take to get you into a lot of these very desirable West Metro suburbs. Places like Edina are going to take you more like $700,000 or $800,000 to get into. Minnetonka is going to be more like $5,000 or $6,000. Wayzata, similar to Edina, is going to be up closer to $1 million. So really understand the entry points, and is it expensive is going to vary significantly if you're talking about Minneapolis proper versus if you are moving out into places like the West Metro and some of Minneapolis's most desirable suburbs. I think another thing that really shapes perception of price, and then we'll wrap this section up, is just how competitive certain price ranges are. Homes in these lower to mid-range brackets tend to move quickly. buyers figure out good options very quickly and they jump on them. So that kind of gives the perception of things being a bit more expensive because things move really quickly. So the first place you're going to start to get answers to is Minneapolis Expensive, is when you start looking into the housing market, and you're going to find $390 to $425 is the median value. What you're going to get is you're going to get some great options, but you're going to get some older options, probably not a lot of stuff that's turnkey. And as you start getting out into the suburbs, those entry points will often go up. If we have not met, by the way, my name is Chris. I'm a lifelong resident real estate agent extraordinaire. Myself, my team business partner Trevor, we get out into these communities. We shoot these cute little videos to show you guys what life is like here. If we can help you, contact information is all right here. It is also right down below. Don't be shy, and let's keep rolling with our video. The second big way people are going to answer the question, is Minneapolis expensive, is by starting to look at some of the costs that it takes to remain here. Section 1 was dealing with buying into Minneapolis, what it takes to get here, more the direct housing costs. Section 2 is going to be looking at some of these fixed costs, and we got a few kind of broad topics we're going to hit on hopefully pretty quickly. So one of the biggest difference we're going to talk about is going to be property taxes, and I'll just tell you, I don't need any research or numbers to tell you, Minneapolis and Minnesota is a state that likes their tax revenue. You can decide how good or bad that is for you. But compared to the Minnesota Department of Tax Revenue and Analysis from the Tax Foundation, Minnesota's average effective property tax rate is about 1.1 to 1.2%. Contrast that to the national average of about 0.9%, and very quickly you can see, yes, property taxes will be a little bit higher here in Minneapolis and the greater surrounding area. Practical terms for most of us, that property taxes is paid with our monthly mortgage payment, unless you bought with cash. But for most of us, that tax bill is paid with our monthly mortgage payment, and having a bit higher taxes can, yes, mean a little bit higher monthly payment for that home because of those property taxes. Moving on to utilities, and now this is going to be another category that merits some at least consideration or knowledge before you pick up and move to Minnesota. So the good news, according to Rent Cafe and Council for Community and Economic Research, overall utility costs here in Minnesota, the rates at which we are paying for these services are pretty much on par with national numbers. That's the good news. What makes Minnesota a little bit different here is the climate. Minnesota, we all know about Minnesota's and our crazy winters. What you might not know is we have blazing hot summers here as well. So Minnesota requires sustained heating in the winter and sustained cooling in the summer. And then you mix that up with Minneapolis's older housing stock. A lot of these are not super efficient, and heating and cooling bills are definitely real things. I'm not going to tell you I have hard data in front of me, but I'm going to tell you that there probably are more pronounced than they are in many parts of the country, because at least many parts of the year you get that reprieve. You have to pay for that air conditioning, but you get some reprieve here in the winter. Not Minnesota. You get that AC cranking in the summer, and you get that furnace blasting in the winter. Home maintenance in the state of Minnesota, again, I think this is going to probably be a bit more than national average, and for similar reasons. Number one, again, like we talked about, we have an older housing stock. There is not tons and tons of new homes around the Minneapolis area, so you're dealing with an older housing stock. Older homes, by definition, are going to not be as efficient. They're going to require more maintenance. Tie that back into our seasonality, these brutal freeze-thaw cycles that we have every year. That stuff is hard on your homes, and it requires maintenance and upkeep. So I don't have set maintenance numbers for you here in the state of Minnesota, but understand that's going to be a real bill. If you wanted a ballpark number, I would be absolutely, depending on your home, allocating a minimum of $5,000 a year to maintain your home. And obviously here and there, you're going to have things like when you need a new roof, and it would be significantly more. Sales tax, back to that lovely sales tax thing. That is another one of these unfortunate costs of remaining here. When you go purchase something, you are going to pay sales tax. Good news, according to the Tax Foundation, Minnesota's statewide sales tax rate of about 6.875% is pretty on par with national numbers. When you factor in local taxes, the average combined state and local rate is about 8.1%. I believe it's 8%, right on the nose in Minneapolis. That's roughly in line, slightly above than other metro areas. Again, just something to be aware of. Minneapolis and its taxes, we have a slightly higher sales tax rate as well. Food, costs of food, slightly higher here in Minnesota compared to other national averages and trends. According to Rent Cafe and Bureau of Labor Statistics, grocery prices in Minneapolis are modestly above the national average. So this isn't specialty shopping or dining out. Keep that in mind. This is not lifestyle stuff. This is just your food, slightly more expensive. Transportation costs are near on par with national averages. That includes gas prices. I will tell you, Minneapolis is more of a you need a car to be here kind of city than some places like New York. So just something to keep in mind. So to put a bow on this section, you know, the costs that are going to stay with you if you remain here, things to be aware of. You're going to have slightly higher property and sales tax, and maintenance costs and home ownership costs can be a little bit higher due to our serious seasonality and the pain that this weather can inflict on Minneapolis and Minnesota residents. The third and final way people really answer the question, is Minneapolis expensive, is in the way everyday life unfolds. Category 1 got with buying into Minneapolis, getting here, the housing costs, things like that. Section 2 was the fixed cost to remain here, your taxes, sales taxes, the things you have to invest in to stay here. This section is really more about the costs that you are going to elect to participate in and whether or not that makes Minneapolis feel expensive to you. So let's talk about a few things here. Number 1 is food. We talked a little bit about this already in section 2. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics with their regional data, spending on food away from the home, so dining out, is costs in the Minneapolis metro are higher than the national average. So just dining out, that's not fancy high-end dining, that's just dining out. As someone who lives here, I'll just tell you, you take 2 people out to dinner for a decent dinner. I'm not talking about fast food, I'm not talking about the fanciest steakhouse you can find. It's pretty hard to do it for less than $100. If you're gonna take 2 of you out for dinner, have a drink or two, have a nice dinner, $100 is probably the floor. Groceries also run a bit higher, about 2% higher than the national average, so not drastically. I would say the flip side is Minneapolis has a lot of, we're really into wellness, so you'll find a lot of really cool health and wellness style food stores. Getting off topic, groceries are about 2% higher. That's a basic cost of living. Childcare, let's talk about that one. I have experienced that one firsthand, and the first time you realize how much daycare is, I'm not gonna say you regret having children, boy. That's a nasty number. So according to Childcare Aware Minnesota, full-time center-based infant care in the Minneapolis metro costs around $1,700 to $1,800 per month, which puts annual infant care way over 20 grand, that's just terrible. Nationally, the average cost is significantly lower, closer to $1,000 a month, contrasted to Minnesota's $1,700 to $1,800 a month. So childcare, according to the numbers I have anyway, childcare is significantly more expensive. That's definitely something that needs to be on the radar. And that kind of feeds just then into just activities in general. Sports, kennel lessons, camps, just the cost of having kids. I have 2 little boys myself. Just a few real world examples. I put them both in a 6-week flag football program last fall. 6 weeks, each kid was $300, so that was $600 for them each to do 6 weeks of flag football. I have them both in an after school program. They're in 1st grade and 3rd grade, so they're in an after school program 3 days a week while myself and their mother works. That cost me about $600 a month. Obviously, you're gonna have a lot of control over these costs. It's what you choose to engage in or not will affect those bills. Entertainment and social life in general, just for us adults as well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Again, spending in the Minneapolis metro is more than the national average on recreation and entertainment. And to me, that's a bit more nuanced. Minneapolis and this area is way above the national average in categories like recreating, green spaces, park, culture. Minneapolis has a fantastic music, restaurant scene, so it doesn't surprise me that people from Minneapolis and Minnesotans are spending a bit more than the national averages on these categories anyways, because that's a really strong point for us culturally anyways, but it's something to be aware of. Right. So what ties all this last category is what ties these costs together now. These are the costs of life that you are choosing to assign to yourself for participating in that everyday Minneapolis life. So when you put a bow on it, what can you really say as far as the question, is Minneapolis expensive? From a purely quantitative standpoint, we can say very concretely that no, the answer is no. Minneapolis is not one of the more expensive cities in the country. In fact, according to multiple cost of living indexes like Rent Cafe, like Redfin, Minneapolis is about 5 to 7% below the national average on cost of living, and that is largely driven by our lower costs of transportation and our lower housing costs compared to many major metros. Utilities also here are at or below national average. At the same time, as we talked about, Minnesota stacks up higher than the national average in a few of those unavoidable, unpopular categories like taxes. Property taxes we talked about. 1.1 to 1.2% higher than that national average of around 0.9%. Something you can think about. Minnesota sales tax, Minneapolis around 8%. That also slightly higher than the national average, and that's going to apply to everyday purchases. Then we talked about the categories that shape daily life. Groceries, 2% higher than the national average. That Minneapolis childcare cost is significantly higher, $1,700 to $1,800 a month compared to $1,000 for the national average. So childcare costs in Minnesota, yes, I don't want to say it, but significantly more expensive than the national average. Spending on food away from home, entertainment, recreation higher than the national average. That doesn't surprise me at all, because if you look, Minnesotans engage in that stuff. We're much more active compared to the national average. So taken together, the data shows something very specific. Minnesota is not in any way an expensive city the same way that coastal cities are, or a proper luxury market is. That being said, we can definitely also not say Minneapolis is one of these low-cost cities once you account for things like taxes and some of those climate-driven costs like extra home maintenance, heating and cooling costs, things that everyday life tends to incorporate. And that's really where the more personal part of this starts to come into play, and where I can't tell you guys what's right for you. If you value established neighborhoods, public infrastructure, great school systems, parks, cultural amenities, and a certain baseline of quality for everyday life, Minnesota might feel like a hell of a fair trade for you. On the other hand, if you're highly sensitive to reoccurring costs, you're comparing it to lower tax or warmer areas in the South, it can feel expensive, even though the headline doesn't put us at the top of those national rankings. So, what did I miss, my Minnesota friends? Are we standing out anywhere else? And you out-of-staters that have moved here, always curious to know what you guys have experienced firsthand, because you guys have walked it. Thanks for watching. Love to hear from you guys in the comments below. My name is Chris. Contact information is all right here. If anything in this video piqued your interest, you're thinking about making a move, reach out, drop me a line. Would love to chat with you.